Speak. No man can pass through the gate.
Doom has been at the forefront of the first-person shooter genre since the series' inception in 1993, enduring through almost 30 years different trends and tastes, yet always being able to rip and tear its place into the gaming landscape. Between 2005 and 2016, however, Doom lay dormant, and in that time we saw the rise of the Call of Duties and the other grey and brown shooters. Now, while these games found huge success, Call of Duty in particular, they oversaturated the market and the genre became a bit stale. Of course, there were some great first-person shooters that came out in that time, like Bioshock, Titanfall and Borderlands, yet nothing really managed to fill the void that Doom left behind. Thankfully, Doom made a welcome and triumphant return in 2016 with a reboot sequel amalgamation that sought to modernise the series without forgetting its illustrious and gory past. After putting the industry on notice and throwing down its contendership for the first-person shooter throne, 4 years later, Bethesda and id have returned. But is the crown back on the helm of the Doomslayer? Let's find out, shall we? Welcome to Easy Game. My name is Luke and I have been playing Doom Eternal. Now, hands up. Who else was just as excited for the follow-up to Doom 2016's outstanding soundtrack as they were for the game itself? I know I was, but honestly I was a little worried that the soundtrack wouldn't be able to live up to its predecessor, but turns out that worry is completely unfounded. The soundtrack is treated as a sequel to 2016 just as much as Eternal itself is, and Mick Gordon has taken the beloved 2016 soundtrack and just builds on top of it, reusing some of the great sounds we love, expanding on them, and has crafted a new yet familiar soundtrack which may be better than the last. Hard to tell because we haven't been able to listen to it on, say, like Spotify or something like that yet, but it may well be. Once again, they have absolutely nailed the atmosphere and feel of the game, and Mick Gordon's soundtrack is a tentpole of that. Gameplay is similarly crafted, taking the outstanding groundwork done in 2016's outing and just building on top of it. Eternal feels just as great as 2016 did, with that little bit more fluidity that comes with time, but they've sprinkled in... no, wait, hold on, that doesn't sound quite right. They've smashed in some new additions like wall climbing, bar swinging, to give you yet more options to play with on the battlefield, and making traversal feel that much more fun without losing any of that fluidity. However, the platforming sections can be a little tiresome, even with the new mechanics, often feeling a little bit too forced when they could have probably had a much simpler route. The platformer puzzles, they're not bad, they just could do with a little bit more refinement, and it feels like something that will probably have been nailed by the next game. The weapon and suit upgrade system returns from 2016 with a few tweaks and a little more depth, such as the addition of sentinel crystals, which allow you to upgrade your health, ammo and armor, while also giving you an upgrade on your secondary attacks such as your grenades and your flamethrower. They will also give you a bonus if you string the two linked upgrades together. Now, gaining upgrade points for weapons and your suit has been streamlined, with weapon upgrade points now being granted through a demonic corruption meter, which you fill by completing the combat encounters in each level, completing the time challenges that you come across, as well as the Slayer Gates, which transports you to an arena and lets an array of demons loose. The Slayer Gates and the time challenges, to a lesser extent, are honestly some of my favourite parts of Eternal. Having to strategize your way around these tight and tough encounters and being rewarded with points for your weapons is a smart upgrade on 2016 and feels adequately rewarded. This new approach adds way more depth to the core gameplay and has you work harder and smarter than before. In the build-up to launch, there was a lot of talk about chess, and id have implemented a more strategy-focused combat in Eternal. The fun and frantic pace is still there, but now there's added difficulty, and you have to think a lot more rather than mindlessly shooting anything that moves. To achieve this without losing the core feel of Doom is an achievement in itself, and it works so incredibly well. They achieved this firstly by making ammunition that bit more sparse, and it makes you think a lot more about how you're using your arsenal and which weapons and abilities are needed at which time for which enemies. The devs also put in a lot more focus on said weapon abilities and forcing you to make the most out of each of them. So each weapon and subsequent upgrade gives you a certain advantage over different enemy types. For example, you can use the grenade launcher on the shotgun to shoot a grenade into the mouth of a caca demon for an instant stun, or using the heavy cannon's precision bolt to shoot off an arachnotron's cannon. This is especially prevalent in those time challenges and Slayer Gate arenas that we talked about earlier, as you'll be forced to face multiple enemies at once, and you'll not last long just going in all guns blazing. You need to prioritise which enemies to take out and when and how to do it. It's a really clever way to evolve the intense gunplay for 2016, and they just add a complete new layer to it, making the game as a whole that much more enjoyable and rewarding as a result.
There are motion sensors and artillery everywhere.
It's story time. As is well known by now, Doom 2016 took a rather hands-off approach with the story, letting the player sift through as many codex entries and transmissions as they wanted to, if they wanted to delve into that side of the game. However, Doom Eternal has a much more front-facing story. Following on from 2016, Hell has invaded Earth, and is up to the Doom guy to save it, and to do that, he must find and kill all 3 of the Hell Priests, and then go on and stop the Khan Maker from harvesting the Earth. Through the campaign, you will uncover so much lore about Hell, the Night Sentinels, and the Makers, just to name a few. There is a lot more depth than you'd first expect from a Doom story. It is quite an interesting tale, learning more about the Doom Slayer and how he is and always has been a key part of this prophecy. But, as usual, Doom Slayer just doesn't care.
Then his soul will be at peace.
Perfectly accompanying the story are the codex pages, once again telling you all you need to know about the world of Doom, from each character and enemy that you meet to every location you visit. They are all very well written, both concise and highly informative at the same time, and especially useful are the enemy pages, which tell you about weaknesses and tips for dealing with said enemies, which again aids in the more strategic approach that Doom Eternal is taking. The toy collectibles are also back, but this time it's more than just little Doom guys. There's a toy variant for every enemy you counter, all of which double as a character gallery as well. Added to this, you can also find various vinyl records that unlock some classic Doom franchise tracks. Cheats also make their return to the game and can be found in the form of floppy disks hidden around the game worlds, just waiting to be found and used for your amusement, especially the one that makes confetti burst out of demons. You can look at, listen, and apply all the collectibles that you have found on your travels in Doomguy's cool new base, the Fortress of Doom, which is basically a flying man cave. You'll travel back and forth to the fortress rather than simply advancing through the levels. You can go back and explore, as well as there's a lot of cool things hidden within the walls of the Fortress of Doom. The fortress feels like it has another cool purpose though. It's almost like it's there to encourage the player to explore and find all those in-game collectibles, as the fortress has a bunch of empty shelves and frames splattered around that will gradually fill with items the more you collect. Also hidden within those walls are a few weapon and suit upgrades, a badass classic weapon, the Unmaker, which you can unlock by completing all the Slayer gates, and a few cool new skins, including the OG Doom armor. Now, other than the Unmaker, all of the other items are unlocked with Sentinel batteries that you can find throughout the campaign, and you can earn an extra one in each level by completing that level's 3 challenges. As with most other things, Doom Eternal makes great use of its series history by bringing back some enemies from the original games, especially Doom 2 in this instance, such as the Pain Elementals, Hellified Soldiers, and the Arachnotrons. On top of this, there are a number of enemies from Doom 2016 which are also making their return, but have been given a new lick of paint to make them more in line with the original depictions from the early Doom titles. And with these enemies, Doom has embraced its silly side just a little bit. This is especially evident in the sound effects when performing a glory kill. Now, of course, there are a new wave of enemy types as well. There's the Whiplash, which is a new favourite of mine, despite how frustrating it can be, because it will dictate the flow of the fight and draw your attention away from everything else. There are also the Tentacles, which are there to keep you on your toes in between combat encounters, popping through wormholes in the ground and underwater, which makes traversing hallways that little bit more difficult and a little bit more interesting than before. However, there is one enemy that stuck out in particular for me, and that is the Mongolian. He's super heavy, who is just one frustrating boy. He's basically a demon doomslayer meant to be your equal. He wields a big ass axe and a big ass shield, and he gets a little help from a spirit wolf. Now, they are interesting enemies because they actually used to be on the side of the Doomslayer, but inevitably swapped and joined the Calm Maker. But they're just a pain in the ass. Get too close and he's just going to shotgun your face off. Get too much distance and he's got an energy attack that will take chunks off of your health. You try to attack him out of turn and he will just block and rebound it with his massive shield. Add the waves of fodder demons that he'll spawn with him and that damn spirit wolf thing, and what should have been an epic encounter grew a bit tired after a while. I do think he would be a much better fit in the game if he had been a single encounter boss, but he does show up a few more times during combat, each time just diminishing his initial fear-inducing aura and just becoming groan-inducing instead. Finally, let's talk visuals. Now, Doom Eternal maintains a visual theme that 2016's Doom laid down, but they've added some new, differing environments. From the snowy mountain terrain of the cultist base to the fantasy utopia of Urdak, the homeworld of the Makers. There's a lot of variety and vibrancy to be found throughout Doom Eternal, and it's a nice crescendo from the foundation of Doom 2016. All of the demons look great and disgusting in equal measure, and they're all instantly recognisable as Doom enemies. For the most part, Doom Eternal ran well as well, with only the occasional stutter or frame rate dip, so no real complaints there. However, I did occasionally, really late on in the game, have a minute or two where audio just randomly stopped altogether. I hopped out and put a random YouTube video on and the audio was fine, so I'm not quite sure what went wrong there. I did also have a very late game issue where after a death, textures just didn't finish loading, so everything looked very PS2. But again, this did not last long. Doom Eternal is pure fun. From what is possibly the most hyped opening to a video game to the titanic final boss. While it's not as run and gun as its predecessor, it does encourage more thoughtful combat, which in turn makes encounters more challenging. But overcoming those challenges are made to feel so rewarding as you're constantly learning about your enemies. The alluding to chess is really apt because each enemy is treated as a chess piece, with the imps and soldiers being pawns and the likes of the marauder being queens. And it's not only a huge relief when you finally clear that stage and hit the glory kill on that queen piece, but it's a thrill like nothing else.
If you continue, you will bring down the heavens' wrath. You are but one man. They are no longer your people to save.